It has been quite a few months since Easy Anti Cheat, otherwise known as EAC support, has been added for Linux. And in that time, the best way to put it is there's been very limited adoption. There's like a couple of titles that are now working fine on Linux, but most of them still aren't. But recently, Epic, along with the help of Valve, have taken a step to make this basically as easy as it's ever going to be. So EAC isn't just one system, it's actually two separate versions. We have the Epic Online Services version, otherwise known as the EOS version. This basically integrates EAC with the Epic Account Services, the Epic Game Store, and all of these other tools made for the Epic development cycle. This was initially developed for Fortnite and ultimately released to the public for developers who want to use it. And as of 2021, I believe if you want to release a game on the Epic Game Store, it has to make use of the Epic Online Services. The other version is the non-EOS version, which is basically just EAC. It does its anti-cheat business, and that's basically all. And if you want to release a game on Steam or any other platform and have anti-cheat in it, this version will do everything you need. So up until a couple of days ago, if you wanted to have EAC working on Linux, you'd be required to update the SDK and also forced to use the EOS version. And this has been a pretty big problem for developers because traditionally, their games didn't make use of the EOS version because traditionally, that version didn't exist. You only had the non-EOS version. And many dev studios have their entire toolchains built around the non-EOS version, and you can't just strip out one and replace it with the other without redoing your entire toolchain and basically rebuilding the application. So you can actually go to SteamDB and check what games are actually making use of the Epic Online Services. This isn't the games making use of EAC, that's a separate list. But basically, most of the games on this list are games also being sold on the Epic Game Store. Now, I don't know where this idea came from, but some people have been spreading around the non-EOS version is deprecated. Now, I haven't been able to find any reference to this from an official source whatsoever, and that doesn't actually make any sense because major titles that came out very recently are using the non-EOS version. So, Apex Legends, non-EOS. New World, non-EOS. Halo, the Master Chief Collection, non-EOS. Rust, non-EOS, Dead by Daylight, also non-EOS. And if you really want to, you can go through the entire list of games using EAC and type them into the Epic Online Services list, and what you'll realize is basically none of them are making use of the EOS version unless they are being sold on the Epic Game Store. And it makes total sense why developers are not using the EOS version, because why would you use the EOS version when that's just adding in an extra point of failure into your game? Because now not just your game servers can have a problem, but now the Epic game servers can have a problem, causing your game not to work. So going forward, we're going to have the implementation that should have been there from the start. If you're using the EOS version, you can still do Linux anti-cheat. If you're using the non-EOS version, you can now also do Linux anti-cheat. I feel like the reason why it wasn't like that from the start is because Epic wanted more developers to actually use the EOS version, and the Steam Deck seemed like a massive device coming out, so if you can convince developers who are using the non-EOS version, who want their game to work, to migrate over, maybe that's going to happen. The problem is that nobody migrated over, and Valve probably paid them a bit of money under the table to make this happen. I'll leave a link to the Valve documentation in the description down below, but basically what you need to do is you don't need to update the SDK. You can update it, but updating the SDK is not required. What you do is you go to the EAC partner website and you click Enable Linux Support. Now, once you've done that, you go and download the EAC Linux library for the SDK version you're actually using. So it is going to depend a little bit on your version. If your SDK is so old that the library isn't available, it probably wasn't working as anti-cheat anyway, but assuming you're using a fairly modern version of EAC, download the library relevant for your SDK version. This is going to be called something like Easy Anti Cheat _x64.so. And what you do is you stick it in the folder next to the Windows library, the Easy Anti Cheat _x64.dll. You publish the new build to Steamworks, and then that gets published to Steam. People can download it, and now it works. There's one really weird thing about the way that Valve actually phrased this announcement. So they specifically say this doesn't require updating game binaries, but it does require updating your game. So what I think they actually mean by this is when you go and integrate this EAC Linux support, it doesn't require actually updating the game code, just the libraries that are shipped alongside the game. It's a bit of weird phrasing, but updates are required, just not for the developers. Like, you can literally have someone do this who is not even a developer. You can get someone like in HR to do this update and it will be fine. Now, at this stage, implementing EAC support on Linux is about as easy as it's ever going to get. It takes maybe 10 minutes to do it, depending on how long it takes to like download the library and then re-upload the new build. And that's it. But I don't know how many developers are actually going to implement this because we still have a very interesting test case. And that test case is BattlEye. So unlike EAC, BattlEye has been supported on Linux for a very long time, and getting it working on Linux is basically as easy as saying to the BattlEye devs, enable BattlEye support on Linux, and they're like, okay, we'll do that. And then it's done. That's all you need to do to actually enable it if you're already making use of BattlEye inside of your game. So the problem here, though, is that even though it is that simple, and now everybody knows that this is a thing that you can do, I think only about 5 or 6 titles since the announcement of the Steam Deck have enabled BattlEye support on Linux. It's as easy as it's ever going to get, but that is still the case. And the reason for that is actually pretty simple, because even though it is as simple as it's ever going to be, many companies are still going to actually want to test their builds. And that's going to cost money. Like, it might not cost as much as, like, rebuilding your anti-cheat from the ground up, but it is still going to cost some level of money. And some of the developers out there may just not want to support Linux because with games like TF2, CSGO, which do have Linux native versions, there is sort of this idea that having your game on Linux makes it more available to cheaters, which hasn't stopped people doing it on Windows, but there is still this idea that Linux supports cheaters more. Also, some just might have an external vendetta against Linux and just don't want to support it. But we'll see what happens with the Steam Deck and the Steam Deck verification program, which is now being extended to look at anti-cheat games, which in its current state, it's not going to really find much, but it will find some games. A lot of the games are made by Valve, but it will find some games. So developers are going to be contacted, and when they're contacted, they will have a week to submit their test data or submit a new build of their game that actually supports anti-cheat. And if they don't, then whatever data they have is going to go public, and many games are going to be marked as unsupported. If the Steam Deck is a big sale, then I feel like a lot of developers out there actually will want their games supported on the device. So maybe that is actually going to push some to actually go and do it now that it is so simple to do. As it stands, the Steam Deck launch is going to be very rough if you care at all about multiplayer games. Single-player stuff generally works pretty well, but I don't know how it's going to go. We're only a few short weeks away from the February release, and with everything now in place, it's basically resting in the hands of developers. But over time, I've become less hopeful for the Steam Deck launch, but if it becomes a Steam Machine 2.0, at least what'll happen is there is more stuff to make Linux gaming better, and then maybe Valve's third attempt will actually be good. But I could be wrong. So that's going to be it for me. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And if you like this video, I'm going to go and like the video. And if you really like the video and want to become one of these amazing people over here, go check out my Patreon, subscribe to Bearer Pay, link in the description down below. I've got a podcast called Tech Over Tea, a gaming channel called Brodie Robertson Plays, and that's going to be it for me. So, I'm out.